Hey guys, I'm wrapping up restoration on another Predicta set, and this one has some interesting features I thought worthy of a video. This is a debutante, but it's a late production model. When exactly they stopped making Predictas is a bit up in the air. It was thought that it was in '61, but I've seen some with tubes that were made in '62. But for sure, the late production models are kind of a hodgepodge. So this is an 11L43 chassis. The vast majority of 17-inch Predictas are 10L43s. The 10 meaning it was 1960. The 11 meaning it was 61. That being said, there's really no official service in for the 11L43. There's just an addendum. But even that, I've worked on half a dozen 11L43s and I think they were all different from each other. For one, the tuner. There are two distinct tuner types that came with debutantes. This is the old type. This is the type that came with the 60s sets. The Princess, the Siesta. But it has a feature on it, that I don't think I've ever shown you guys before, which is a trimmer pot in the back right corner here, in the place where they would normally be a local distance switch. This is a set intended for motels, which we've seen before. Often they have a label up on top of the cabinet right here with instructions on how to operate the set. This doesn't have it. It may have at some point. It was removed, but there's no discoloration or anything, so it may not have ever had it. But what it does have is this control, which is called a noise limiter. What it is it's a potentiometer in series with the volume control on the front, which would allow them to limit how loud the TV could get. So these were being sold off, from what I've heard from interviews and whatnot, towards the end, during the bankruptcy and Ford was taking them over. They cobbled together mismatched chassis, cabinets, tuners, whatever they had to just use it all up. And they added this on some sets. But I've certainly seen plenty of motel sets with the label on top that did not have this. So let's get some audio going and see what it can do. So there's a nice 300 hertz test tone. And if I adjust this, I should be able to change how loud it is. Now, an enterprising tenant could, if they had a screwdriver, could defeat this. There we go. So, there. Now yeah, it has a very noticeable effect on how loud the set can get. So, it's about its maximum. So now that's as loud as I can make the TV. So, interesting little tidbit. And there's no local distance switch because these were hardwired into the closed circuit system with coax. So that's another feature that some of these have, is this one doesn't, because I think there was this set had been worked on a bit, and this is not unusual for these sets for some monkey business to have gone on with the antenna terminals, but on some of these, the tuner input, which is 300 ohm twin lead balanced, there'd be a 75 ohm to 300 ohm balun built into the set, so you could feed it with a 75 ohm coax directly without having to have that external balun that I end up putting on most of these sets. Okay, so that being said, this set is working well, but when I got this set, it was in miserable shape. It had been caved in here. I had to bang the cabinet back into shape. Some missing knobs. The owner thought I might just end up scavenging parts out of it, but I was able to find all the missing bits and pieces, except for the back. So I ended up having a reproduction back made. there is an outfit. There used to be Retrotronics, and if you put in that domain, you can still get to the site, but you'll get redirected. It's, I believe the original owner, he's no longer running it. His kids took over, I think. They make reproduction backs, mostly for radios, but they do a few TVs as well. I think they're now FLP, YLP Reproduction, something like that. I'll include a link. They use a laser cutting machine on masonite, and it works beautifully. You can pick from many patterns. If they don't have it, if you can send them an original or give them detailed dimensions, they can make it up for you. So this is cut out of masonite with a laser knife. So when I opened it up, I could smell the burned wood, residual odor. It came unpainted. It is an absolute perfect match for the original back. They also do it for the holiday. It used to be you could get this in different colors, like red, and it would be silk screened with gold ink, just like the original, for the various functions. I don't know if you can still get that. And it costs more, of course. The prices seem to be a little all over. This used to cost, I think, $75. Now it's not listed. And it took a while because they were on vacation, but in the end, with shipping, I think this was $120, something like that. So yeah, it's certainly expensive, but it is absolutely perfect. I would not dream of drilling all these holes out of a piece of masonite, and considering what these sets are worth when they're, because otherwise this is in fantastic condition. It's worth the effort. I ended up painting it. I used that same what do they call it, cottage white. It used to be Navajo white. It's darn near perfect color match to the cabinet. But there's a challenge. One, I need to drill some holes because it does not have the hole for that noise limiter, and I had to replace the linearity control sticking out here, so I need to enlarge this hole a little bit. Power cord, I need to dig one up that hopefully is compatible. I thought I did. It would be something like this, a non-polarized rectangular. You put it through here, you put a C-clip on the other side to hold it in place. This is a little bit too long. So I gotta go through my stash, see if I can find one. But the big issue is the antenna terminals. People have asked, has just come up with absolutely nothing that's anything like what these originally were. But I'll come up with something. Let's see, I've got some other backs here. Oh yeah, so this has it. This is what an original back would look like. So it would have these guys on it, which I'm sure was custom for these sets. It's metal with a couple of U-channels and screw terminals. You see you can attach the internal antenna and the tuner, or screw in an external antenna. And here's what the printing would have looked like. So we don't have the printing, but otherwise it is, I'm sure they had an original and they cloned it. It fits perfectly. Well, here's how it turned out. It took a little bit of tinkering. Here's a new old stock line cord, held on securely by that clip on the other side. And for the antenna terminals, I have a bunch of these old twin lead, new old stock, unused. It's 2 screws on a phenolic strip with connectors in the back. And those existing holes, I'm right up with that. So I just had to drill a couple holes and put some screws in there. And then on the other side, I used a bit of twin lead to connect up to the tuner. If you're wondering why there are 2, it's for the ones that have the UHF option, which are few and far between. I dug up enough new old stock mounting screws that have the integral washers. Boy, I would love to find a supply of these. They're kind of unusual. I think they copper plated the steel and then treated them to turn dark. Maybe they turn dark over age, but they've all looked this color, every one I've ever seen. So I think they were chemically treated to darken it, and the plating prevents corrosion, and the integral screw is great against masonite because screws tend to dig into them if you don't put a washer on it. And I just had a slightly file with a rat tail file one of the holes here to accommodate that replacement linearity control, and I made a judgment call. I did not drill a hole for that level limiter. I left the original opening for the local distance switches this set doesn't have. My thinking is that if this back ever finds its way onto another set that has that switch and doesn't have that control, why butcher it? And I just put the control on max. I know the owner is just going to use the front volume control, so that is that. So, final thing, just make sure the set works, and that's that. Nice to get another one done.
Wait.
Well, I was about to just record a final segment demonstrating how well the set is playing when the image died.
What's the matter, hon?
But the set is still on, still have reception, have great sound. Just no picture. What happened was the image started to fade and the horizontal collapsed, and vertical a little bit, and it's just gone. Just gone. No smoke, no pop, nothing, and the set is still working fine. The current draw is normal. Well, this gives us an opportunity to talk about a few things. One, it stinks. And it's just the reality of working on vintage electronics. You can spend hours getting the chassis working perfectly on the workbench, put it all back together, put in that last screw, plug it in, and a minute later it dies. Gotta take the whole darn thing apart again and go over it. Typically, if you completely overhauled something, it's going to be something minor, but you never know. So when I restore something like this, I replace all the paper caps, replace all the electrolytics, try to put in a set of new tubes. But there still are a lot of original old parts: power transformer, the yoke, the flyback, the coils. And typically those hold up pretty well, unless the set's really been abused, exposed to moisture, as corrosion, and such. But anything's possible. So, back in the day, what they would do, they call it burning testing, I believe, is after you've got something restored, repaired, I take it off the workbench, I put it over somewhere in the corner, out of the way, and run it. Run it several hours a day for maybe a week before I would call it done. Because I don't want to give it, the worst case scenario is to give it back to the owner and they get it home and 2 minutes later it dies. I've had a pretty darn good track record. I can only think of one TV ever that anybody had an issue with. It was a portable 10-inch Admiral, one of the little metal two-tone jobs, and the high voltage lead had simply come loose from the CRT. I think I shipped it to him. He ended up hand delivering it back, and so I recall I fixed it while he waited. Otherwise, because I completely overhaul things and do hours of testing afterwards, generally it works out pretty well. In this case, I had run it a few hours before putting it back together, and my intent was to run it for this week back together, and immediately died. Now, what could the problem be? So we know it's something catastrophic. We know it's at the power transformer. It didn't blow a fuse. I said there's no smoke or anything, and it's still generally working. So it's going to be isolated to just the screen circuitry. And then we look at the nature of the way it failed. The image didn't just instantly disappear at full raster, which means the picture tube is probably fine. Likewise, the yoke is probably fine. Flyback, maybe. I don't think the high voltage rectifier went out, although it'd be nice. That's an easy thing to replace. Otherwise, the high voltage would have just blanked out immediately. What we saw was it collapsed mostly horizontally. So we think of the horizontal circuit, horizontal output tube, horizontal oscillator tube, and their associated components. Possibly a loose yoke connection. There's also the damper circuit. Maybe the damper tube went up. That would also be fantastic, because I just pop in a new damper tube and away we go. Also could just be a loose connection. I may have just spent more time talking about it, what it might be, than it'll take to fix it. The only way we're going to find out is to take all this back off and get inside. Now, one nice thing is I don't need a test signal to check this out. I just need to get a raster. I've seen people ask, what is a raster? A raster means the screen is, you have horizontal and vertical deflection and brightness. It just means that you have the images, or sorry, the electron beam is scanning across the phosphor. That's what a raster means. Okay, so the stuff we're going to be looking at, here's the connection for the yoke. That's a possibility. Horizontal output tube, definite possibility. Damper tube right behind it, very much a possibility. And then the CRT connection's less of a possibility. And then inside here we have the high voltage rectifier tube. So the first thing I want to do is power it back up and check all these tubes and see if they're lit up. This is a parallel strung set, so it is entirely possible for a tube to go out and the set will continue playing. If you ever wondered why do they call these cheater cords, this is why. Because it lets you cheat the safety interlock. You're not supposed to do this. The interlock is there for your safety. You're not supposed to be able to turn a TV on without the back being in place. But you're not supposed to poke around. There's high voltage present. Alright, we need to reduce lighting so we can observe tube glowage or not. Hey, is that damper tube out? No, it's gone. It's just faint. I think it's a tube behind. Right there. A little hard to see. Fortunately, the high voltage rectifier they glow so dimly we would never see it. You know, I think that I can't tell. Yeah, I think it is glowing. Of course, make sure we have brightness up all the way. Oh, now the damper tube is glowing. It just got considerably brighter. It's that guy right there. But to see it, oh, there we go. We got our raster back. That was it. That was it. Bad connection on the tube socket. Alright, so now what am I going to do? I'm not just going to say, oh, it's fixed, put it all back together. We're going to pull that tube, we're going to make sure the pins are clean, possibly swap out the tube if the pins are corroded, maybe put a little deoxit on the tube pins, put it in and out of the socket a few times, and then wipe off the pins. That's an easy way to clean it. But there you go. Sometimes that's all it is. And generally I just haven't had too much trouble with these sockets, so I don't bother replacing them. This is interesting though. Oh, this is a later tube. I was going to say, it says 6DM4. It should be a 6DA4. It says 6DA4 on the other side. That's common in later production tubes where the tube business was drying up. But there was still a demand for replacement tubes. So they would try to make tubes that would sub for as many types as possible. And often later generation tubes had better specs than early generation tubes, but could sub for them. So a 6DM may very well be an improved 6DA, and you could use it for either one. That being said, this does look like kind of a cheesy, cheap tube. And that's by design that there are some pins missing. This is just a half-wave rectifier, so you don't need all the pins. And there can be some pretty high voltage pulses on this, so they leave some of these empty so they don't arc between the pins. But I'll see if I can dig up a better looking one. I bought a whole case of these off of eBay a while ago. And I'll get a better one in there. There's one downside when you don't have all the pins. It doesn't fit as tightly into the socket. This is not as much holding it in place, so that may very well be an issue too. In the interest of making sure everything is correct, I pulled the chassis out. It's not too bad. There's 5 screws below you have to remove, and you don't have to disconnect everything. You can just pull it back to give you enough lead length. And I didn't notice any significant problems, so let's try a different tube. This time we got an RCA 6DA4. Quite a bit shorter than the other one. That's why I think since this is a combo DM4 DA4, it has somewhat different specs than an original. But same deal, doesn't have all the pins. But let's give this guy a try. Make sure. Yeah, I mean that fits in there really solidly. And I'll pop this guy back in. And I'll slide this back in. I won't put all the screws back in by any means. I'm just going to slide this back into position and make sure everything is working. Alright, we are back in business. That's going to be it. I hope you found this educational, interesting, at least entertaining. I am a little frustrated to say the least, but I'm very glad it is back and working. I will let this play for a while, turn it off, turn it back on, and let it play periodically over the next few days, and then I will finally call it done.
Knock, knock. Who are you? Don't you remember me, Mother? See who could be at the door on Carol Burnett tonight at 11:10 Central on BTV.
I brought in Ensure Max Protein.